an annual event that we, the three of us, go off and do these things, and the question is like, well, why? Well, it's a Guinness, isn't it? That's the obvious one. But no, with HF these days, the noise levels around suburban areas is getting higher and higher, and those of us who are getting to a certain age will remember earlier days where typical levels were S1 or 2, but now typically we're getting S8, S9 noise levels. So one way to get around this is to go off into the country, go somewhere away from all the noise. So from this perspective, I mean, one of the questions is, how many people have operated Stroke P, portable? Many people? 1, 2, few? Okay. So a few of you have done it. So you'll appreciate, if you've gone portable, the noise levels in the country are quite low. So therefore, what we're going to be talking about tonight applies to just literally going down the road, finding somewhere, like even like Lyme Park or somewhere in the open, away from all the electrical noise, and you'll enjoy a much better quality of received signal on the HF bands. We chose Inishmaan. As I say, we've been to several other islands, but Innishmaan this year was chosen. It's the least visited of the Aran Islands. So Tom's going to talk a bit more about the location, but you'll hear as we go through that it's quite an experience, and I hope you find it entertaining. Ask questions as you go, please. We're happy to share our experiences. And like I said in the overview, you have an expectation of what's going to happen, and there's always some surprises, and there's always things to overcome. All right, so presentation is going to take probably an hour or so. So Tom will cover island information and give you some background about what Inishmaan is, where it is, and what life is like there. I'll talk about the planning, because you'll appreciate that if you're going somewhere, planning is quite handy to know what to do. Because once you're on a remote island, if you haven't got a little bit of, your patch lead that links your transceiver to your aerial, then you're a bit in a mess. So yeah, planning was key. But even with the best of plannings, there are things that still go wrong. Now Kieran will then talk about travel and accommodation, how we got there, where we stayed, where we ate and drank. Then Tom will talk about, now when we were there, we operated from the base station, from the cottage, but a lot of our activity was a portable setup. And Tom will talk about the portable setup, what the station was, what antennas we used, where we operated from, and you'll see some photographs as we go. And then right at the end, I'll talk about, so having been there, we were there for 3 days, which was something like about, 2.5 days of operating, but not full days. When we do these things, it's more of a leisurely, breakfast first, then go out and do your thing, and then have a lunch, and then go and do some afternoon, and so it's not a marathon. Our aim is to have a bit of adventure, the challenge of operating in somewhere where you've got to remember to take everything with you, and fun, and have some fun. And like I said, drink Guinness. And then last of all, there's a short film. I'm the resident photographer. Yeah. Although we've got photos from everybody, but you'll see, I just do it. And even when I did it myself, I laughed. I didn't realise what we're like when we're left alone. Okay, so over to you, Tom.
Right. Okay. Let's put the first slide up. Okay, Innishmaan, basically speaking, the island's it's quite a small island. Basically, there's 3 islands in Galway Bay. And population now in the sort of 150, 160, that sort of range. At one time, in fact, in the mid-19th century, the population was about 400, over 400. So it's decreased tremendously over there, and it's sort of decreased steadily. I suppose in the middle of the 19th century, they probably had a potato famine there, just the same as everywhere else, actually, in Ireland and in Scotland. So that would have knocked the population back, and lots of people left. And they just don't come back, actually. But they are trying their best, actually, to make sure that the island doesn't disappear completely, population-wise, so they're working very hard at it. There's 3 islands, actually. I'm not an Irish speaker, actually, or an Irish Gaelic speaker, so it's like Inish. You broke it better. Kieran, Inishmore, Innishmaan, and Innishmaan. Ear. Okay, right. It means big, middle, and small. As far as I can tell, the Inish bit you can guess it means island, I think, actually. It's 3.5 square miles, so you can imagine it's not very big. It's sort of got a slight bump in the middle like that, and it's absolutely incredible. When you I looked at some photographs, or satellite photographs of the thing, just a sort of background for this, and it is remarkably sparse actually in terms of vegetation. It doesn't have a lot of stuff growing on it because it's almost all limestone, and incredible stuff actually. It's got two types of. Peter's mentioned the one there. There's grikes and clints. Let me tell you, the grikes. It's basically a type of the limestone was laid down about the time of the ice ages, and in fact, of course, the whole thing was scraped because there was a glacier came down and actually scraped Scotland and scraped the coast of Ireland as well. So anything that sort of was protruding gets worn off by the moving ice sheet, and so it leaves it flat. But limestone's incredible stuff because it gets easily eroded by the acid and the water in the air and stuff, rain. So you get loads and loads of cracks in it, and they always look like symmetrical patterns. I guess it's a kind of something similar actually to what you get like on the Giant's Causeway. In fact, in Northern Ireland, although they look different, they don't look the same, do they? I mean, they look squarer, the ones that were on Inishmaan. And the actual plates that's in between, I call them flags actually, but you make flagstones. They look like flagstones. It's limestone paving. Yes, you could imagine chipping them off and taking them home and putting them, on a path. They're like that, and they're everywhere. They're incredible stuff. You'd think they were man-made. And the grikes actually are about sort of 6 inches, 4 inches deep, and they get as I said, there's not much soil in the place, but it's quite sparse actually. But in fact, these things gather soil, and then they get little alpine flowers and stuff growing in them, and the place has got what would be described as a sort of, I suppose, an Atlantic maritime type of climate. So there's a lot of rain, warm, damp rain type of thing, and they get hardly any snow or frost in the winter time. And so it's a good climate for growing sort of like alkaline alpine type plants, and it's quite famous for that really. The other thing actually that's amazing about the place is, and I was absolutely struck, and I think we've got a picture of it later on, and that is the stone walls. Every spot has got like a built stone wall on it, and the fields are they're not very big, but they're all higgledy-piggledy, and basically they've got these beautiful stone walls built, and God knows who built them actually, like the 400 people that were there in the 19th century maybe, but they're really things of beauty actually to see them. And then of course we've got the houses in among the stone walls, and I think we've got a picture of them. Yeah. So the whole atmosphere of the place, you've got the small oldish houses. It's a lot of new houses as well, but you can definitely feel the sort of character of the place as it was. Perhaps they want to keep it that way, really. In fact, the kind of long, low houses, and then these stone walls. So beautiful thing, beautiful place. The roads are tarred, but in actual fact they're not very wide, and they're set down between these stone walls. And they don't really want a lot of people there, so basically there's not much in the way of cars. I think we actually have a photograph at some point, in fact, which I won't spoil, in fact, of the local transport. So you're encouraged to walk. Now we were very lucky because basically we had a pub right next door to where we were living. It was excellent actually. We didn't even need a taxi, all we had to do was sort of stroll gently around the corner. So it was lovely there, and they have a ship that comes once a week actually, and brings stuff over with them. It looked quite busy actually when we were there that day. In fact, there's a photo of that as well. In fact, there's a lot of stuff on that, and but as I said, and when the boat comes in, all the cars that are on the island, the local people cars, all crowd down to the pier to pick up everything that has to be collected, and it's quite good there actually. Pete mentioned here, in fact, he found this, the cripple of Inishmaan, and I can't remember his name. In fact, it's somebody in fact, who wrote that. I've never heard of him before, but the cripple of Inishmaan. Oh, MacDonough is the name of the guy. But there was another guy who was very famous that lived there, a fella called John Millington Synge, who wrote the Playboy of the Western World.
Oh, there you go.
Now, if you're very old, you probably might have just heard that mentioned in English literature. That is one of the sort of seminal works in English literature, the Playboy of the Western World, actually. But he actually had a little house on Innishmaan, and basically we didn't get to see that. In fact, I would have quite liked to see it because we didn't have the time. There's also actually on the island there's a fort.
Yes.
There's a fort as well.
We didn't see that.
We didn't see it, but apparently the fort is right on the top of all the stones. So
maybe next time.
Next time, yes, that's right. Yes, that's right. So it's a lovely, as I say, the island has got a character all of its own.
Next slide.
And yes, let's move on. Yeah, you had a picture in the top corner. Just let me quick go back one page just instantly. Yeah, right, okay. Yeah, you can see the grapes there, and you can see the alpine stuff growing in among them. Right? That's a good example. And there's the Inishmaan Island there on the Galway Bay. Okay, forward. Yeah. Oh, there you go. There's the fort. Right. I think it was called Conan's Fort. And you can see the fields there. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. The stonework, the building work that must have gone into those dikes. Amazing. There's so many of them. And as I said, the fields. They must have in the 19th century. They must have had a hell of a job cultivating that and growing enough food for everybody for 400 people. Because
I think the purpose of the walls is also to stop the wind.
Oh, it was because they get this
eroding. So they put the soil in.
Absolutely.
And the walls
right.
keep the soil so they can grow vegetables. Otherwise, it gets blown away.
That's right. But I mean, but basically, when you think about it, the soil is so thin.
Exactly.
When you look at it, it's so thin. But you can just see there, in fact, with the fort and then the wall, and then basically just look at the fields around it. That's a fantastic. That's what it looks like right all over. It's amazing. Actually, I think it's got a kind of feel about it and a structure to the building work that's been done on it that's quite unique, really. In the British Isles or whatever you call it. British Isles, Irish Isles, whatever. You know, the Irish would say it's the Irish. Yeah, they'd be very offended if it were called part of the British Isles these days, and I apologise.
It is part of the British Isles.
It is.
Ireland's part of the British Isles.
I think it still is, actually. Although I used to know an Irish guy who was quite upset about that when I was just saying.
My name Jerry with a B.
So there's the boat in at the pier. We'll talk more about that later on. And basically, Peter managed to get a nice picture there. I think that's a horse. Is it?
It's a horse.
It's a horse. Yes.
That's a horse.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. And everything on that boat is lifted out with a crane thing. Okay.
Whilst we were there, if they have a scrap car, there's nowhere in the island to get rid of the scrap.
No.
So they just pick this car up from the jetty
right.
and just plonk it on top of the container to take it to the mainland to be scrapped.
Yeah.
Yep. It's just, as Tom says, all self-contained.
The cardboard note in the window for the
For
scrap for Tom or something like that.
I know, very worrying that. So anyway, there you go. There's a feel for the land. So that's a picture of what's on the boat. That's the boat in at the pier. More about the pier later, and there's the picture of the walls and stuff, and that's the top of the island. All right.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So, right.
Over to planning. Right. As I mentioned in the intro, planning. That's something that possibly we don't do enough of. But I'll read this out. I looked around for something that described plans. See if you know who said this. Plans are of little importance, but planning is essential. If you think about that. Plans are of little importance, but planning is essential. Any idea who said that?
Sounds like Donald Rumsfeld.
Winston Churchill. So basically what he's saying is the plan you produce is only as good as the day you write it or events change. But going through the planning process forces you to think about what could go wrong, what you need to take, and it minimises the risk. So even though you don't necessarily write it down, the act of planning actually helps you, mitigates the risk of not taking stuff.
I agree with him there as well.
So, from a planning perspective, these were our constraints. No visitors' cars were allowed on the island. So when we've done when we go to Arranmore, for example, we take a trailer mast with a towed by a Land Rover. We take a box trailer towed by Tom's car. Yeah. We take another car that's full of transceivers and food, a lot. We have a convoy of things going across. Yeah. And that's okay, because going to Arranmore, you go off the mainland and you go onto a big car ferry and you go onto the island and you can drive there. That's fine. In Inishmaan, you can't take your car. So we have to think about, right, okay, what are we going to take? And that all then came down to what are we going to do in the expedition? What's our aspiration? What do we want to do? And basically it came down that we crossed off the linear, too heavy to carry. But we had to carry things either on our back or, as you'll see, in boxes that were with little trolleys and stuff that we had. So, and that had to get on board. We're okay getting across island because we're in the car, but we had to leave the car at the port on the mainland and then carry everything on to the little boat that then went across to Inishmaan Island. So we'd also discussed what we're going to do, and we simply said fixed operation from the cottage. We normally put a simple antenna up, plug into the mains, and do our bit. And portable operation we wanted to do for the beach. Now that entailed batteries, what antenna to take, something that, because we couldn't guarantee the weather. So if you're on the beach, some protection, somebody to sit on, a table to put the kids on. So all these had to be planned out, and so we had a few meetings, didn't we? You'll see in a minute the photograph of the meetings. All had to make sure that what we took we could carry, and we had this sufficient to be able to do what we wanted to do, which was to run a portable station with a reasonable 100 watts power, and with a decent antenna, and make some contacts. And in addition to that, it was the kit. Well, Kieran volunteered his FT897. He had some LiPo batteries, which we can talk about, which is LiPo batteries. I think they're, what were they, Kieran? They're Tourigney, with the charger. I think of the voltage, I think they're individually. We had two batteries, didn't we, to get to power the radio. And we had to do a diode dropper, because when you add up the voltage, it was at 16 volts with two batteries. And of course, as they discharge, it will come back down into the range. So we had to put a couple of dropper diodes in just to keep us, without blowing the rig up, but keeping the power. And it worked very, very well, didn't it? In fact, it lasted. It was amazing how the LiPos lasted when you're drawing, whatever, probably a couple of amps standby, and then maybe up to 15, 20 amps when you're transmitting. It was pretty good. So, and tools to take and stuff like that. And so that, in our discussions, we said, right, we're going to have to take stakes to put the antennas in. Tom kindly agreed that the metal stakes that we have, which weigh a ton each, wooden ones would be sufficient, but we then needed hammers and stuff like that, and it all adds up. Anyway, in the end, I was asked to contact the owner about, is there any antenna space in his back garden, and has he got tools? In particular, has he got a hammer? So I phoned him. It was Airbnb we booked it through. No answer. So I left it a day. Phoned him the next day. No answer. This is like 3 days to go. So I texted him. No answer. So I'm beginning to say, like, we've got 1 day to go. We don't know whether should we take hammers. We don't know if we've got space. Whatever we do. In the end, I phoned one more time. This voice answered. Hello. Yeah, right. It's Pete. We're coming tomorrow to the island, bringing our kit. Oh, yes. I said, I've just been trying to phone. Oh, was that you trying to phone me? Yes, I saw you were trying to phone me. Right, well, didn't you think of phoning me back or texting me back? Yes. So I said, we're coming by the ferry. So, have you got any tools, like a hammer? Yes, I have. Okay. Oh, good. Excellent. Right. We'll be arriving on the ferry. It'll be about sort of 7ish or something like that. Your garden, there's a space in your back garden. Yes, we have a back garden. Yeah. No, how big is it? Oh, it's big enough. No, we need to put an antenna up for that. Oh, there's a bit of concrete on the side for it. No, we need. Anyway, in the end, let's hope it's big enough. the shop be open? What time are you coming? I said, it'll be 7 o'clock. Oh no, shop will be shut then. Right, any chance of you getting some milk and some tea for us? Sure, yeah, I can do that for you. Great, fine. I said, so I guess when we come, we'll just go straight to the pub. Pub? I said, yeah, the pub. Just down the road. No pub. I said, no, there isn't there? There's a pub. No, we're dry. There's no pub around here. Hang on a minute. You are on Innishmaan, aren't you? Yeah. Yes, I am. Sure, I'm on Innishmaan. Yeah. It says on the bit that we read, it says there's a pub nearby. Sure, yes. So there is a pub. Yes. I'm just having you on. Thanks very much. You're that far away from cancelling. If there's no pub, we don't go. So yeah, so that was Michael, the owner, which you'll see more about later. So the plan of it really was, you'll see the photographs. So that's us, getting everything ready in the boxes at the top. You'll see more of this in the film, but that's us at the top left-hand corner. We sort of limited ourselves to 2 boxes and backpacks and trolleys. You can see the trolleys there. That's us having our meeting in the middle. I think that was just before I went to the pub, wasn't it? That's their bit of listing things, and the way we do it, we list out what we need for the base station, and you start working out that to transmit, I need a transceiver, I need an aerial, I need a patch lead to go there, I need a power supply, I need a lead, and you work it all around, draw it all out, and then you list it down what you've got to do, so that you effectively, when you draw this all out, including the headphones and the microphone, you then have got everything, including a laptop for the logging and a pencil paper, all that sort of stuff. So we have a list, and it's divvied out between the 3 of us. So, Tom takes the rope, Kira and I take everything else. Tom divvied it all out. Tom took aerials, all sorts of stuff. So down the bottom you'll see, that's where we'd arrived at the port, ready to get the ferry to Inishmaan. And that's me and Tom with our trolleys. Tom's got the antennas on the back, you fasten them on, and we've got backpacks. So it wasn't bad actually. I mean, as long as you're on flat surface, towing the thing was quite good. And of course, this is where we do most of our
Just picking up, actually, those trolleys were really good. In fact,
yes.
I didn't know how they'd work, but they were really good and they're dead cheap as well. In fact, and you can put a lot of stuff in those boxes.
Yeah, about 20 quid, I think. They were,
right,
like that. Well, the boxes we have, those are the same boxes we use when we
use them up
Aaron and Moore.
Yeah.
Really good, rugged boxes, and you pack them all up, put everything in, and then strap them round the trolley. And it worked okay. The only tricky thing was, great on the level, we walk down the gangway or down the actual pool, and then when you get into the thing, the boat is not like the Irish ferries. It's literally, you've got to step over a step and put the stuff. And when we loaded the stuff, we took the trolleys apart, carried across the boxes. They put them down on the lower deck, which we got into. Fine, and we went on the upper deck and enjoyed the travel. And you've seen in the film, we're travelling having a great time. What we hadn't planned for is that when you get to the other end, you actually leave from the top deck. So you put your stuff at the bottom, and you leave by the top deck. So all our stuff, when we arrived at the place we're going, was in the wrong place. And there was a frantic bit of lifting stuff up.
Everybody else had to do the same thing. Actually,
but
all the crew and
some of them knew what they were doing.
a huge amount of stuff.
So planning, is
it was all to do with the levels on the piers.
We didn't do too bad.
Yeah.
Just the odd hiccup.
Yes.
Okay, travel and accommodation. That's Kieran.
It was down to me to plan the travel and obviously the accommodation. And right, first of all, we had a venue which we decided would go to one of the Aran Islands. So we did a search and looking for accommodation for where to stay, and we came up with a recently renovated cottage, 3-bedroom cottage in Inishmaan. That looks good. So we looked at it, Airbnb, everything went fine. We plotted the route, and it's virtually like going due west, isn't it? Crossed down to Holyhead. Originally booked on the 10 o'clock Swift across to Dublin, and then it's motorway all the way to Rossabeel, where you pick up the ferry. you do a little circular around Galway, and you go also go do a big circular around Dublin as you go through the Dublin Port Tunnel. And then it's a couple of tolls, and then they've got a new toll, which we found out about when we got back, and there was a penalty notice, because it's a purple sign between junctions 6 and 7, and you've got to pay it online, and you got charged double. And normally you'd never bothered in the past, but this time the Irish have now passed it up to somewhere in Europe, and they chase you up, and they say they will keep increasing the charges until you pay it. And it was basically double, so I think the original toll was like €3.50 one way. You ended up paying €12 or something like that. And then it's motorway in inverted commas across from Dublin to Galway. It's circumvented north of Galway, which is quite handy. And once you get out of Dublin, it's dual carriageway rather than motorway and the old toll. But it's quite straightforward. Get up to no problems or whatever, and then you route along that base there till you get to Rossaveel. And so we booked on the Dublin Swift, which should take 2 hours, get us there for 12. And it's 120 miles from Stockport down to Holyhead, and it's about 160 to Rossaveel. So they did say allow for an hour around Galway, because if you get there rush hour, it's traffic, etc., etc. So that was fine. And then we started looking at the weather, and the Dublin Swift, it's the cat. So you can't remember anybody else who's been on it, apart from the lads going to our moor. But it's notoriously fickle. And the sea, watching the sea state, it was looking rather, will we get there? Will we get across? And if it didn't get across, if it was cancelled, then we'd have to go on the 2 o'clock sailing from Holyhead on Exeter or Ulysses, whichever one it was. So we made the executive decision that we'd go and get on the 8 o'clock ferry, thinking that was saving, we'd save some time, because if we didn't get across, we wouldn't get across to pick up the 6 o'clock ferry from Rossaveel, and then obviously we'd lose a night, and we'd have to find accommodation, etc. And so we elected, again, met in Dares, briefed at 6 o'clock to pick Tom up, and all the gear we'd packed up the day before in my car, and we got there, and said, can we just come on the early ferry, yeah? That'll be £60, please.
Yeah.
Oh, right, okay, so we paid it, and then the rest of it was straightforward. So we got to Rossaveel, and there's nothing there.
Car park,
one pub, collected our tickets and whatever to get on it, and to park up, and then right, we've got time to go and eat. So we went to the one and only pub, but they're all speaking Irish, and it's part of the Gaeltacht over there, so like on the island, the first language is Irish, so if they're talking to like that now, they'd be speaking Irish, and then they'll straight away just chop and change between the two, a bit like to Wales sometimes. And so, anyway, the chef had gone out in the pub, so that was it. We found a shop, so we stocked up on our bacon, eggs, sausages and tomatoes and bread and whatever for breakfast. And then went on a couple of little planning meetings. Well, we're killing time because we were there quite early. And then we got the 6 o'clock ferry. And that's actually our little boat that we get on. So it's like I say, it's 160 miles. It took us about 3 hours, I think, into something like that. Yeah. Okay, next. Yeah, there we are, on the boat, having set sail. That's the big ferry. Our ferry does Inishmaan and then Inishoor. That one just does Inishmaan, and they have 2 big ones like that. But Inishmaan is quite, Inishmoor is quite popular ferry, so there's lots of accommodation on there. There's even a couple of hotels and the like. But to say ours is least visited, and in fact there weren't that many got off. I think there was only another couple that got off. There was a school came on shortly afterwards on a trip, and they were going to the other island. But as you see, beautiful day.
Well,
yeah, beautiful day. Okay. And then we were met by our host, Mikhail, who you can see on the left. And this is the car he picked us up in. It had no back seat. We rested the 2 grey boxes on top of the car. They weren't strapped on, they were just resting on top of the car. There was no back seat. We got the rest of the gear in, surprisingly, it all went in. Tom and I were hunched over in the back. And it went about 5 miles an hour.
Never got out of second gear, did he? No.
And it's a courtesy car. Yeah. Yeah. He said you can use it if you want. Yeah. Needless to say, Whereas Tom and I stood outside the front door, and we're not 6 foot there. There was no way there. And that was actually Michael's mother's house, wasn't it? Yes, yeah, it was his mother's house, and we think he'd done the restoration himself. There's Tom where we're setting up in the back garden, and then, as you can see down here, that ladder there, up there is one of the bedrooms.
Yeah.
There's an old dresser, and obviously a log fire or people, I can't remember, which we put on a couple of times. And then we're starting to plan the aerial here, and we're looking round, and you can see the sea out the background. So we asked Michael, he was there, stood around chatting for 15 minutes or so, and we said, now, do you think the house next door to us, there, do you think he'd mind if we put a stake in his garden? And I said, no, he said, no, he won't mind, no, he's dead. Don't attach it to the tractor was the only thing he said. And he said, that's if you can get a stake in.